It is early spring, 1974. A man steps quietly out of the dense jungle in the Philippines. He is holding a perfectly maintained bolt-action rifle. He is wearing a rotting, heavily patched Imperial Japanese Army uniform, and he is formally surrendering to a young backpacker. This is Hiroo Onoda, an intelligence officer. He had just spent the last 30 years hiding in the mud, eating coconuts, and shooting at local police. He was vigorously fighting World War II, a war that had actually ended 3 decades earlier. The obvious question is, why didn't he stop? People assume he was simply lost, trapped on a remote island with no information. But that is factually wrong. Onoda wasn't trapped by the jungle. He was trapped by his own mind. Over the course of 30 years, the outside world tried endlessly to reach him. Allied planes dropped thousands of surrender leaflets over his mountain. Japanese search parties left massive stacks of newspapers in the jungle for him to find. He saw them, he read them, and he consciously chose to ignore them. To understand this supreme level of denial, you have to look at his programming. Onoda was trained at the Futamata branch, a specialized intelligence school. Normal Japanese infantry were taught that surrender was a total disgrace. They were expected to die. But Onoda was given the exact opposite order. His commanding officer looked him in the eye and specifically forbade him from taking his own life. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens will come back for you. Until then, so long as you have one soldier, you are to continue to lead him. The military installed a psychological operating system with no abort sequence. He was built to endure infinite asymmetric warfare. So when the war actually ended in 1945, his brain simply refused to process the data. He found the surrender leaflets. He sat in the jungle and analyzed them. He found a minor grammatical error in the kanji characters. His brain instantly seized on that tiny error. He concluded the leaflets were just cheap American psychological warfare, a forgery designed to trick him. This is confirmation bias in its purest, most weaponized form. Any evidence of peace was automatically processed as a threat. Time moved forward. The 1940s became the 1950s. His fellow soldiers began to die. Some surrendered, some were shot in skirmishes with local police. By 1959, Onoda was the last man standing, and the Japanese government made one final desperate push to extract him. They flew his own brother all the way to the Philippines. His brother stood at the edge of the jungle holding a massive loudspeaker. He sang old family songs. He begged Onoda to come home. Onoda sat in the brush, a few hundred yards away, listening to the voice. But his psychological fortress was too strong. He rationalized it again. The enemy captured my brother. They forced him to do this. Because they captured my brother, I must stay here and fight harder. Why would a human mind do this? Because admitting the war was over meant confronting a crushing truth. It meant admitting that his friends died in the mud for absolutely nothing. It meant admitting that he spent his youth killing innocent local farmers. It meant admitting his life's single purpose was a complete lie. The cognitive dissonance was simply too vast to survive. The sunk cost trap had swallowed him. He chose the brutal, muddy fantasy of war over the agonizing weight of reality. He decided he would rather die a soldier than live as a fool. By the early 1970s, the Japanese government declared him legally dead. A massive military empire couldn't find him. A modern search party couldn't find him. But a wandering college dropout named Norio Suzuki did. Suzuki traveled to the island with a simple, crazy goal: to find the lost soldier. He didn't bring guns. He didn't bring orders. He just set up a tent and waited. When Onoda finally approached him, weapon drawn, Suzuki didn't fight back. He just calmly explained that Japan was peaceful, that the empire was gone, and for the first time in 30 years, the psychological wall cracked. The human connection bypassed the military protocols entirely. But even then, Onoda's programming held one final restriction. He told Suzuki, "I am a soldier. I cannot stand down without a direct order from a superior officer. So Suzuki went back to Japan. The government tracked down Major Taniguchi, the man who gave the original order in 1944. Taniguchi was no longer a soldier. He was managing a quiet bookstore. They flew the former major back to the jungle. He put his old uniform back on, walked into the trees, and met his lost subordinate. Taniguchi read the official surrender document aloud. Onoda stood at stiff attention, and as the words finally sank in, the 30-year wall collapsed. He wept aloud. He handed over his sword, his rifle, and his ammunition. The war was over. Onoda returned to Japan in 1974. A hero to some, a tragic ghost to others. But the Japan he returned to wasn't the empire he had fiercely guarded in his mind. He walked into a world of towering neon signs, bullet trains, and hyper-capitalism. The contrast was paralyzing. He realized his entire life's singular mission was a phantom. The empire he starved for didn't even exist anymore. His sacrifice was meant for a ghost. We typically look at Hiroro Onoda as a bizarre historical anomaly, a crazy exception. But the terrifying truth is, we do exactly the same thing. We just don't do it in a jungle. Humans stay in toxic, dead relationships for a decade simply because we've put too much time in. We stay in failing careers because changing paths means admitting we wasted our youth. We build massive psychological walls to ignore obvious truth. We fight for phantoms just to justify the scars we got fighting for them, because the pain of realizing we were wrong is often far heavier than the pain of staying in our own private jungle. Confronting the sunk cost fallacy requires immense courage. It requires you to admit you were wrong, that the time is gone. It forces you to realize that quitting isn't a weakness. Surrendering to reality is the only way you survive a war that ended years ago. So you have to ask yourself, are you fighting for something that is already dead? Are you constantly rationalizing bad logic just to protect the time you've invested? When the loudspeakers tell you it's over, do you listen? Or do you grip your rifle tighter and walk back into the mud? Admitting defeat can save your life. Hiroro Onoda lost 30 years to a ghost. You don't have to. The war is over. You are allowed to go home.